Okay, so this is the last portion of chapters 9 and 10. Uh, Chapter 10 talks about differential diagnosis, and basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a short list of potential issues. Sometimes it's very clear they have sensorineural hearing loss, and hearing aids are their only option. Sometimes it's a medically related issue and we have to refer them to a medical professional. But what we're going to talk about today is once we determine there's no medical/surgical treatment for their auditory disorder, what we do about it. And these are typically take the form of hearing aids or cochlear implants, so the rehabilitative options. Here's a visual of a hearing aid. This is from the chapter. Each hearing aid has some specific components. It has a microphone or multiple microphones to help hear and noise better. When you have oral rehabilitation, we talk about that in more detail. There's a receiver or a speaker. There's a volume control. Has to be a battery. Some are rechargeable, some are not. Sound enters microphone here. It is processed through the amplifier and the digital signal processor. It is then presented to them through the receiver, the speaker. Same here. Received in the microphone, processed in the digital signal processing chip, and then presented to the person through the receiver. Here's an example of this is likely a child with a behind the ear hearing aid with a custom ear mold. These are used for retention. Kids grow, their ears grow. All you have to do is change this instead of changing the hearing aid. This is the material from which we make this mold. We take an impression of their ear and then we send it to manufacturer, and then they build that mold. Now, this mold has specific acoustic properties that you learn about in graduate school and how best to help the person with hearing loss. These are all behind the ear hearing aids, just different styles. Traditional behind the ear, what we call an open fit behind the ear. You'll see these advertised a lot. You can see that there's not much in the ear compared to this one where there's a traditional ear mold. These are very popular. And they're popular because they're comfortable. They let the ear breathe. Same here. The difference between this one and this one is that there's a speaker right here that sits down by the eardrum, where this one doesn't have that. But that's when we say receiver in the canal, that implies that speaker's down there. These are custom. What we call custom hearing aids. This is an in the canal, full shell product. Completely in the canal, and this one is a micro in the canal, which are newer, and it's very deep fitting. This is where most of the custom started because they couldn't fit all the pieces, the components into a small device, but now they can because of digital processing, digital circuitry. So we're looking for, does this hearing loss have a negative impact on communication? That's primarily what we are concerned for. Once we determine that, we have to make sure there's no medically treatable, surgically treatable condition. If there is not a medically or surgically treatable condition, we proceed to hearing aids. Most often, if it's a bilateral hearing loss, we recommend 2 hearing aids. And it's always a discussion between the family members if the family members are required to help their, let's say, adult parents. We look at age, degree of hearing loss, type of hearing loss, their dexterity, their activity level, and their finances. In particular, dexterity is extremely important. If they cannot manipulate the hearing aid, change the battery, put it in, take it out, it's not a good fit. Their activity level, listening environments. Are they in very challenging listening environments? That might help us guide, do they need a higher level digital product? And of course, finances. People have to be able to pay for them. It's mostly out of pocket. Some insurance companies have a limited benefit for hearing aids, but it's mostly out of pocket. So adults, we do the assessment, we explain the findings, and then we really kind of delve into what kind of problems the patient's having, what kind of environments they're in, and so forth. Finances have to come up because I have to know how much they are. So that's typically the progression for adults. For children, same thing, assessment. We discuss the results. We talk to the parents. Now, for children, hearing aids are often covered by insurance. I think it's state mandated in, I don't know, all 50, but many states, that if the child is under 18 or 21 years of age, that the insurance is required to cover the hearing aids. And we know the sooner you amplify children, the better off their speech and language development will be. And so if you want to have them over time perform close to their peers with normal hearing, early identification and fitting hearing aids is extremely important. Now, for young kids, typically they use the behind-the-ear products, right? They don't really have much say in anything other than what color their ear molds are. But for older kids, once they start hitting 15, 16, you can start to consider some custom products and give them a little more input. But when they're young, they don't have much input. And again, we always have to look at the degree of hearing loss because certain degrees of hearing loss require certain levels or certain technologies, okay? So as an audiologist, we always recommend 2 hearing aids unless we find that wearing 2 hearing aids is detrimental, which only happens maybe in 2 to 3% of the cases. And so binaural amplification provides for what we call binaural summation. And essentially, the brain can take information provided from each ear, analyze it, and make better decisions when you have a binaural input, given a binaural hearing loss. Okay, so binaural summation, we talk more about that in hearing science and in grad school, but binaural summation is just essentially the benefit of having input from both ears. So we verify hearing aids to make sure they're providing the appropriate level for fine tuning. And this is the equipment we use. This is older equipment, but I shouldn't say older equipment. This is less commonly used equipment, but again, I like this type of equipment. It was designed by an engineer. It looks very kind of, doesn't look like most of your patient equipment, but there are multiple companies that make these devices, and what it's called, typically referred to as real ear equipment or probe microphone measures. And essentially, there's a speaker that will output sound, various types of sounds. You have a probe tube assembly here and here that will be placed close to their eardrum. And then you measure how the response, the sound pressure level at the eardrum with and without the hearing aids. And when you're measuring it with the hearing aids, it helps you get an idea, are you getting enough sound for this person? Now, for children who can give you input, adults, whatever, they can tell you, give you information about sound quality, loudness. But for young children, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, 18, 25 months old, they cannot give you that input. And so this equipment is very important to use to estimate what they need based on a host of research studies, because they can't give you any input that's too loud, speech isn't clear enough, what have you. Whereas adults, older children can do that. Again, we're looking for specific characteristics, the frequency response, the gain, how much boost it's giving you, and then what we call maximum output. Those are 3 areas that we really need to look for to make sure we're giving the child or adult maximum audibility. Here's some information about patient candidacy and hearing aid selection. What we just talked about is verification. Validation is where we give them we give them patient questionnaires to fill out to validate its performance. Okay. All right, so just wrapped up traditional hearing aids. Now we're going to talk about amplification options that are surgically implanted. So there's three different types of surgically implanted devices. Generally, we have bone conduction hearing devices where the person does not utilize air conduction pathways but utilizes bone conduction. Middle ear implants, and then cochlear implants. Bone conduction devices, basically, they're like a bone conduction oscillator. And these are typically used when somebody has a middle ear, some kind of middle ear condition. I lost my mouse. I can't find it. When somebody has a middle ear condition and it delivers information via bone conduction straight to the cochlea or cochleae. And we call them, one type is called a bone anchored hearing aid, or BAHA, B-A-H-A. And very, very popular with people who can't use traditional hearing aids. And there you can see the schematic. So you have the bone conduction device. And where is my mouse? I can't get it to... Anyway, but it's basically a bone conduction. It's just like a bone conduction oscillator. Some are implanted, some are not. This one is not implanted. Okay, this one is just on a headband that's placed on the ear. So they don't all have to be implanted, but many of them are. Okay, but it's a bone conduction hearing aid. Candidacy, people, basically anybody who can't wear a traditional hearing aid. They have conductive loss, they have certain ear malformations, they have atresia, there's no, no ear canal. Even for some people who have single-sided deafness, they can be used. That's a little bit more complex, but let's focus on those who cannot wear traditional hearing aids. Middle ear implants basically have an external device, which you can see behind that gentleman's right ear. And then there's some processing, some implant that goes into the middle ear space, and then it vibrates. So here are some candidacy. Basically, people can't understand words with at least 50% accuracy, because if they can get 70-80% words when you increase the volume, insurances don't want to pay for this. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of dollars. Have to be at least 18, and for various reasons cannot wear other hearing aids. Now, cochlear implants are the kind of last resort, if you will. The electrical signals will be presented to the cochlea instead of the hydraulic signals. And so there you can see the device. The item behind the ear is the processor, and then the device, the blackish color device, connects to the scalp using a magnet, and then that sends the signal to the cochlea. Here's an example. Again, the processor is the item below, and it looks like a hearing aid, right? It has a microphone. It's very similar, except it transmits electrical signals instead of acoustic signals. There's some specific candidacy in there in the book, but I typically tell people cochlear implants are for people who cannot utilize traditional hearing aids. If you can utilize a traditional hearing aid, your insurance, the FDA, does not recommend cochlear implants. So we talked about the different components, which are discussed in the book. There you can see it in schematic. You can see the electrode array, number 5, inside the cochlea. And that provides for the tonotopic stimulation, like in a normal ear. All right, that's it for the surgical implants, and we'll chat more about those.